good morning from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to our live coverage of the launch of the 5th H-2B Japanese transfer vehicle to the International Space Station. Getting a live look now over on the other side of the planet at the Tanegashima Space Center, where the H-2B rocket, which has the H-2B encased inside, sits on its pad, all poised and ready for that launch, currently targeted to take place at 6:50 a.m. Central, 7:50 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. As you can see, it's the late evening over there in Japan, where the H-2B is sitting on the pad, fueled up and ready to go. It's been a bit of a slog to get to this point, as the rocket originally scheduled to launch back on Sunday, August 16th, but some inclement weather in the area has pushed it back to this point. But now everything clearing up, everything looking good and ready to go for this launch today. Just a reminder, if the launch is delayed from today, the next earliest attempt, no earlier than, would be on Saturday, August 22nd. But again, for now, everything looking good over at Tanegashima, Japan for this launch this morning. Once the vehicle gets into its orbit and on its way towards the International Space Station, it'll take several days. Currently targeted to arrive on Monday, August 24th at the orbiting complex. Once that happens, it'll be grappled by the crew on board. That arrival is scheduled to come at about 5:55 a.m. Central Time on Monday. It'll be grappled by the crew on board the International Space Station and then handed over to robotics controllers here on the ground, who will ultimately install it into its berthing port on the Earth-facing side of Harmony. Meanwhile, the vehicle itself, the H-2B, this is the 5th one to make a flight to the International Space Station, the first one flying all the way back in 2009. It's one of the largest vehicles to ever resupply the International Space Station. It's made 4 successful flights so far. This, again, the 5th one. You can see the H-2B vehicle broken down here. It has 2 different logistics carriers, basically where all the cargo is packed in. One pressurized, carrying all of the equipment and supplies that will be brought inside the space station, and then one unpressurized, which is able to carry experiment payloads that are ultimately exposed to the vacuum of space. And then, like many spacecraft and avionics, all of the systems controlling this unmanned vehicle, and then the propulsion module. And then the H-2B vehicle, again, one of the larger, has a several-ton payload capability, today packed with over 4.5 tons, close to 5 tons. And right now encased inside of that H-2B rocket. The H-2B itself is a little over 185 feet in height. You can see its complete breakdown here, but down at the bottom of the rocket has 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters, which help the initial climb into orbit, burning alongside that first stage, which is fueled by liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Second stage able to put H-2B into its preliminary orbit, burning the same fuel, liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. And then the H-2B on top, encased in that payload fairing, which will protect the vehicle on its initial climb to orbit. And again, everything looking good for the launch today. The flight director over in Japan giving the flight director here in Houston a call at about 5:47 a.m. Central Time, saying that they were go for their terminal countdown, which started just a few minutes later at 5:50 a.m. Meanwhile, here inside the room in Mission Control Houston, on-console flight director Tomas Gonzalez-Torres polling the team, getting all of their final go, no-goes for this morning's launch. But as mentioned, everything continuing to be on track for an on-time launch today at 6:50 a.m. Central, 7:50 a.m. Eastern. Packed inside of the H-2B vehicle, over 4.5, actually close to 5 tons of cargo inside. It's packed with over 8,000 pounds of pressurized cargo, and that consisting of supplies for the crew, which accommodates over 3,000 of that 8,000. That including items like food and water, and also clothing and other perishable items for the crew members of Expedition 44. There's also about 1,900 pounds of vehicle hardware, various system replacements, and one of the more important items on board, two new payload racks. Since the retirement of the shuttle, the H-2B, the only vehicle resupplying the station currently capable of delivering these new racks. One of them a new payload rack for the Japanese experiment module, which is going to be installed by the crew of Expedition 44. There's also over 2,700 pounds of utilization or science equipment on board from not only JAXA, but also the U.S. and the other international partners. And then the other equipment packed into there, some computer resources, things like cables and photo TV equipment for the crew, and also about 170 pounds of spacewalking equipment. Other items used by U.S. astronauts during any EVA's extravehicular activities on the outside portion of the International Space Station. A couple of more special items added to the H-2B later on in the manifesting as a result of the loss of some items on the last SpaceX launch. Among those, two multi-filtration beds, which are a critical component inside of the International Space Station's water supply system, helping to ensure water quality for consumption and also technical usage by any payloads on board. Also a fluids control and pump assembly, a component used inside of the space station's urine processing assembly, which is one of the critical components on board for recycling that water. Not only the urine recycled from these astronauts on board, but also the condensation and any other wastewater, helping to drastically reduce the amount of water needed to launch into space to sustain the orbiting laboratory with 6 crew members on board. A number of other items, a wiring collector and a respiratory support pack, which is used to provide breathing assistance if astronaut lung function is impaired, and also some of those EVA, those spacewalking items on board were added after that SpaceX failure back a little bit earlier this summer. And that's just a quick overview of all of the cargo packed into the pressurized section. Also in the unpressurized section is a new external experiment called the CALE, which stands for the Calorimetric Electron Telescope. This is an astrophysics mission or experiment that's going to be attached to the exposed facility out on Kibo, the Japanese experiment module, that's going to be taking high energy readings from cosmic rays as it continues, as it's going to search for any sources of dark matter. Much like the alpha magnetic spectrometer on board the International Space Station, it's another one of those payloads looking at our solar system and beyond, looking to unlock a few more of the mysteries that we continue to try and solve with how our universe is functioning, how it was created, and where it's headed. But meanwhile, on board the International Space Station, the Expedition 44 crew moving through there Wednesday. Right now on board, a number of experiments taking place, including a spheres run being done by astronaut Scott Kelly. He's going to be joining Japanese astronaut Kamiya Yui on Monday following a successful launch where the pair will be responsible for reaching out and grappling with the H-2B vehicle once it arrives. Yui's going to be the prime for this operation. He's going to be backed up by NASA astronaut Kjell Lindgren. And meanwhile, Scott Kelly is going to be inside monitoring all of the systems on board H-2B as the unmanned craft flies into position. You can see Scott Kelly here inside of the Destiny laboratory. Again, that following the successful launch today is scheduled to take place on Monday, August 24th. That capture scheduled to come at 5:55 a.m. Central Time. And then once that happens, they'll hand it over to teams down here on the ground who will maneuver the station's robotic arm, Canadarm2, attached to the H-2B into position before ultimately berthing it to the Earth-facing side of Harmony, attaching it and allowing the crew to open up the hatches and begin unloading that several tons of cargo. That install will happen a couple of hours after that initial capture, currently targeted around 8:45 a.m. Central, 9:45 a.m. Eastern. Again, all of that happening with a successful launch today, happening on Monday, August 24th. But with this H-2B, a large amount of crew supplies, food and water, and other items on their way up to the International Space Station, which currently has supplies for well into the mid-fall. The addition of this vehicle will push many of those supply levels into the end of 2015 and even early 2016. And this just one of several vehicles currently slated to fly with the rest of the calendar year to the space station. Two more Russian progresses capable of bringing food, water, and other supplies to the International Space Station crews, and also not too far out on the horizon, the resumption of our U.S. commercial cargo vehicles flying. Currently with both orbital ATK and SpaceX looking to get off the ground and back into space a little bit later in 2015. For now, though, continuing to march towards that launch time, again at 6:50 a.m. Central, 7:50 a.m. Eastern. As mentioned, the terminal countdown for this morning's launch started about 20 minutes ago at 5:50 a.m. Central Time. The next major events coming up will basically just be at the T-minus 10-minute point, which the final countdown sequence will begin. Once H-2B lifts off, it'll go through a number of stages on its climb into orbit. Those 4 solid rocket boosters on the bottom on that first stage will burn for just under 2 minutes, 1 minute and 57 seconds are the scheduled burn time for those, at which point the first pair will jettison, and then the second pair just a few seconds later. As that happens, the first stage powered by liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen will continue to burn. The next major milestone, the fairing jettison at 3 minutes and 40 seconds after liftoff. The first stage engine should cut off after firing for 5 minutes and 47 seconds, and then just a few seconds later, it'll separate, and then it'll be the second stage's job to push the H-2B into its preliminary orbit, coming online just about 6 minutes after launch. And then it'll fire for a little over 8 minutes, getting, again, H-2B into that preliminary orbit when it can begin its chase towards the International Space Station, with that second stage cutoff coming at 14 minutes and 20 seconds after liftoff. And then the H-2B should separate just a little over 15 minutes after that launch, and then be on its way for its several-day rendezvous with the International Space Station. So this still alive look at the pad out at the Tanegashima Space Center on the Yoshinobu Launch Complex. Contains the vehicle assembly building and the launch pad where the H-2B rocket currently stands on track for that 6:50 a.m. Central Time launch today. Here you can see a complete breakdown of everything once the vehicle rolls out, which we'll catch some video of that in just a little while. It takes about 30 minutes to roll from the vehicle assembly building out to the pad. The assembly building, much like the one we have here down at the Kennedy Space Center, able to integrate everything vertically before the rocket moves out. Then a mobile transporter named Dolly able to move it out. You can see the Tanegashima Island where it's located at the very southern portion of Japan here. The Yoshinobu Launch Complex in the northeastern part of the Space Center. Range control down to the south where they'll be monitoring and controlling this evening's launch, or this morning's launch, evening if you're over in Japan. And so right now, a little over 33 minutes from that launch. Again, 6:50 a.m. Central Time, 7:50 a.m. Eastern, actually taking place at 8:50 p.m. Japan Standard Time. The HTV encased inside of that launch shroud at the top of the H-2B rocket, which was fueled just about 10 hours, well, about 9 hours ago. Usually it's fueled at about 10 hours before liftoff. The elements in Japan finally cooperating. Right now, the Orbit 1 team on console here again, led by Tomas Gonzalez-Torres. Did their go-no-go and everything green here in Houston, ready for this launch this morning. And right now getting a live feed from our friends over at JAXA showing some of the steps that HTV has gone through in its preparation for this launch. The vehicle traveling to the staging center at the Yoshinobu Launch Complex. There, look at the Calais experiment, that calorimetric electron telescope that's going to be carried up in the external, the unpressurized facility. Calais going to be used to look for dark matter and gathering higher energy particles. Another payload being placed on board the International Space Station to help explore our solar system and beyond. Japanese astronaut Aki Hoshide, who has quite a bit of experience on board the International Space Station himself, giving a quick look over how the crew will be able to interact with the hatch, doing a one final check. As talked about previously, this will be the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency's 5th HTV to travel to the International Space Station, the first of which flew back in 2009, September of 2009. It was followed by HTV-2 in January of 2011. 1 year later, HTV-3 was sent into orbit in July of 2012. And then the most recent HTV to fly was just about 2 years ago, almost exactly, flying on August 4th, 2013. So this will be the 5th vehicle, currently 7 scheduled, and agreements being worked for more. HTV, again, one of the larger vehicles able to fly to the International Space Station and bring several tons of cargo. Currently the only one in service able to carry up full replacement racks. These racks on board the International Space Station, these phone booth-sized devices that house everything from experiments to water and food systems for the crew, just a number of items all inside of the pressurized section of the International Space Station. Also having that exposed payload ability, much like SpaceX's Dragon, able to carry up payloads that will be attached to the external portion of station, whether to modules or the Japanese exposed facility, like the Calais experiment flying today will be attached to. As you can see, this video from July, just a month ago, as HTV was continuing to be integrated with the stack, the payload fairing put around encasing the vehicle. The payload fairing will be protecting HTV during the dynamic stages of that initial ascent. That fairing will jettison just a little over 3.5 minutes into the flight this morning. So once HTV was encapsulated, it was moved over to the vehicle assembly building to be integrated with the H-2B launch vehicle. And then this took place just yesterday, that rollout coming right around 2:30 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday. And it was 4:30 a.m. Japan time this morning on Wednesday. The fully integrated rocket rolled out to the launch pad. And again, that rollout happening just yesterday morning, the H-2B rocket arriving at Launch Pad 2 at the Yoshinobu Launch Complex, getting us to where we are now, still poised and ready for launch just about 25.5 minutes from now. The rocket fully fueled. And just to recap, the weather looking favorable for a launch this morning. Some adverse weather conditions, mostly rain. We're violating the launch restrictions for the H-2B rocket until this time. HTV-5 originally was slated to launch back on Sunday, August 16th, but was delayed a little bit, but the clouds able to open up and the rain stop enough to be within the launch constraints, and now we sit here on target for the 6:50 a.m. launch this morning. Just a reminder though, if for any reason the launch is scrubbed today, the next earliest opportunity would be on Saturday, August 22nd. Launch moving a little bit earlier to 5:36 a.m. Central Time, and that would end up with an August 27th capture and berthing. But again, everything continuing to look on track. All reports coming out of the launch control facility continuing to march towards go. The next major milestone will come at the 10-minute point where the final go, no-go for countdown sequence will be given. And once that occurs, everything will be marching towards, again, that 6:50 a.m. Central Time launch. And once liftoff occurs, it'll be about a 15-minute ride to orbit, after which the HTV-5 vehicle will separate from the second stage of this rocket and be on its way to the International Space Station, taking several days to arrive on a 5-day rendezvous profile, arriving next Monday, August 24th, or another early in the morning broadcast for us. Will be coming on the air on Monday at 4:15 a.m. Central, as HTV will make its final approach. That initial capture scheduled to come at 5:55. Here a quick animation of what we're going to be seeing on Monday. It'll approach to within about 30 feet of the space station, at which point crew members on board Kamiya Yui at Prime and NASA astronaut Kjell Lindgren as his backup will reach out with the station's robotic arm and grapple with the vehicle, ultimately move it into place. It'll be moved into place by the teams down here on the ground controlling, and then they'll line everything up and then attach the unmanned craft to its berthing port at the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module. Once it gets attached, they'll be able to perform all of their leak checks and then open up the hatches and begin unloading the nearly 8,000 pounds of pressurized cargo that's being carried inside of this vehicle today. So just about to pass 20 minutes until liftoff. Everything continuing to be reported green, good, and ready to go for the 5th HTV mission to the International Space Station. 6:50 a.m., 7:50 Eastern launch time this morning. More than 4.5 tons of cargo packed into the HTV, the H-2 transfer vehicle for this mission. Among those, again, over 3,100 pounds of crew supplies, food, water, and other perishables for the Expedition 44 crew on board. A great deal of vehicle hardware, replacement parts for various systems, and also two new racks, a payload rack and a galley rack, making their way up to the International Space Station. 2,700 pounds of science equipment and research devices packed in. Also computer resources and spacewalking equipment rounding that out. And then over in the unpressurized section, the 1,400-pound Calais experiment that's going to be attached to the exposed facility, searching for dark matter and other high-energy particles out in low Earth orbit. The station itself right now just off the southwestern corner of South America. With an on-time launch, the station is going to be located just over the Atlantic to the east of Brazil at an altitude of roughly 250 statute miles. It'll also be in an orbital daytime by that point. You can see on the orbit the small triangle indicating where it'll be for this HTV launch this morning. Getting a quick wide view of Launch Pad 2 there at the Yoshinobu Launch Complex on the island of Tanegashima in the southern part of Japan, where H-2B rocket sits ready to go with the HTV-5 vehicle enshrouded at the top. Coming up on just 15 minutes away from this morning's launch. Again, we'll be standing by right around the 11-minute marker, so we'll start to hear on the loops here in Mission Control as they get ready for the go-no-go for that T-minus 10-minute final countdown sequence. Once that occurs, everything will begin to go automatically as the vehicle will march towards its liftoff at 6:50 a.m. Central Time today. And as we get closer, everything continuing to look good. The weather appearing to cooperate with this morning's launch had caused some delays thus far. This vehicle originally scheduled to launch back on Sunday, and some pretty serious weather potentially on the horizon for the area with a typhoon in the Pacific on its way possibly towards Japan. So a launch today able to find that window in between some adverse weather conditions. Up until now, rain had been the restricting factor, but everything appearing to clear up, not hearing any reports that weather is going to be restricting our launch today. So everything continuing to be on track. Again, just about 13 minutes away from launch. The teams here in Mission Control Houston continuing to follow along, getting good reports from their counterparts out with the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency as they continue to monitor and prepare for this launch. The team here in Houston already giving the go. And the Orbit 1 flight director, Tomas Gonzalez-Torres, here in Houston, getting the call from the H-2B flight director that they are go for that final countdown sequence, which should be starting within about a minute.
Restricted areas. Also, the weather conditions were examined and confirmed.
従いまして、宇宙ステーション補給機コウノトリ5号機を搭載した H-2B ロケット5号機の打ち上げを本日日本時間の午後8時50分49秒に実施します。
As a result, we are to launch the H-2B launch vehicle number 5 with the HTV-5 named as Konotori 5 on board at 8:49 p.m. Japan Standard Time today.
And just now past the 10-minute threshold, under 10 minutes now away from launch. Scheduled to come at 6:50 a.m. Central, 7:50 a.m. Eastern. The Japanese HTV-5 ready to go. You may hear it referenced to as konotori, which is the Japanese word for white stork. This again, the fifth HTV vehicle to fifth HTV mission to the International Space Station.
Site operators, they are now performing the final checks, which are all progressing well.
And just a reminder, the first stage and those 4 strap-on boosters will perform the initial ascent. The solid rocket boosters firing for just a little under 2 minutes, and then jettisoning while the first stage continues to burn.
And we are now in the very final stage.
H-2B, a 2-stage rocket. After about 5 minutes, that first stage will cut off. Close to 6 minutes, it'll separate, and then the second stage will fire from 6 minutes out to a little after 14 minutes. Carrying HTV into its preliminary orbit. HTV ultimately separating after 15 minutes of flight. Once liftoff has happened successfully, 15 minutes later, HTV will be separated in low Earth orbit and on its way to the International Space Station. Currently just a little over 8 minutes away from liftoff.
It's 8 minutes to launch. The final terminal countdown starts.
種子島宇宙センター竹崎総合司令塔から H-2B ロケット5号機の打ち上げ状況をお伝えしております。
This is a live report of the H-2B launch vehicle number 5 launch from the Takesaki Range Control Center at the Tanegashima Space Center.
現在、各系ともロケット打ち上げの最終作業を行っています。また、警戒区域の安全は確認されています。
All systems are now in final operation. All safety measures were confirmed in the restricted areas.
A close-up on the vehicle, you can see the symbolic white stork, after which the vehicle is named.
The range safety system is ready.
車上系準備完了。
The range system is ready.
405、404、403、402、401、400。
And right now we're 6.5 minutes away from liftoff. Everything continuing to march forward. A good close-up there on the first stage and those 4 solid rocket boosters, which will be firing and providing that extra boost for the first 2 minutes of flight for the H-2B rocket.
370。
And again, HTV-5 sits atop packed with over 9,500 pounds of equipment, both in the pressurized and unpressurized sections bound for the International Space Station.
毎秒 5.0 メートルです。H-2B ロケット5号機の打ち上げに問題はありません。
It's 6 minutes to launch. The current weather here is clear. Temperature is 28.1 degrees Celsius. Wind is 5 meters per second from the south-southeast. We don't have any problem for launch.
本日の打ち上げ予定時刻は日本時間の午後
So again, hearing the weather cooperating, all weather go for launch. The temperature out there, 28 degrees Celsius, 82 degrees Fahrenheit.
310、309、308、307、306、305、304、 303、302、301、300。
打ち上げ5分前です。HTB-5 準備完了。
It's 5 minutes to liftoff. The H-2B is ready.
89、88、87、86、85、84、83、82、81、280、79、78、77、76、75、74、73、70。
And just 4.5 minutes away now from liftoff.
67、66、65、64、63。
Everything progressing nicely over there at the Yoshinobu Launch Complex in Japan.
Sequence starts.
種子島宇宙セン
The H-2B rocket fully fueled, ready to go, ready to carry HTV-5 into orbit and send it on its way to the International Space Station in Expedition 44.
Launch Control Center at the Tanegashima Space Center.
現在ロケットの管制は吉信発射管制塔から
Under 4 minutes.
The launch vehicle is currently controlled from the Yoshinobu blockhouse.
32、31、230。220。210。200。190、89、88、87、86、85、84、83、82、81、180。
And under 3 minutes away now. Again, once liftoff occurs, all of the events will take just a little over 15 minutes.
られました。
The launch vehicle is switched to the internal power.
Vehicle switched over to internal power.
160。150。140、39、38、37、36、35、34、33、32、31、130、29、28、27、26、25、24、23、22、21、120、19、18、
1段液体水素系準備完了。
The first stage liquid hydrogen system is ready.
12、11、110、
We're under 2 minutes away. The rocket ready to go. That first stage again, those 4 strap-on solid rocket boosters, and the first stage powered by liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Solid rocket boosters firing for just over 2 minutes,
Stage liquid oxygen and hydrogen systems are ready.
or just under 2 minutes, and then being jettisoned just a few seconds later. The first stage will continue to fire for just under 6 minutes.
80、79、78、77、76、75、74、73、72、71、70、60、
フレームデフレクター冷却開始。
The launch deck flame deflector cooling starts.
64、63、62、61、
And passing T-minus 1 minute.
It's 1 minute to liftoff.
56、55、54、53、52、51、50、49、48、47、46、45、44、43、42、41、40、39、38、37、36、35、34、33、
クォーターカーテン散水開始。
The launch deck water curtain starts.
28、27、26、
Under 30 seconds away from liftoff.
22、21、20、19、18、17、16、15、14、13、12、11、10、9、8、7、6、5、4、3、2、1、
駆動用電池
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The engine's igniting, the solid rocket boosters, and liftoff. The White Stork is in the air, HTV-5 heading towards the International Space Station.
5号機を搭載した H-2B ロケット5号機は平成27年8月19日午後
Again, the first stage firing, those solid rocket boosters will continue to burn for just under 2 minutes,
We had a liftoff of the H-2B
along with the central portion, the first stage, providing the initial thrust for the vehicle.
49 p.m. on August 19, 2015, Japan Standard Time.
打ち上げ以降ロケットの管制は吉信発射管制塔から竹崎総合司令塔に引き継がれています
After liftoff, the launch vehicle operation control was shifted from the blockhouse to the range control center.
ロケットは現在初期飛行方位角を 108.5 度とし徐々に南東方
Just about 1 minute into liftoff. The solid rocket boosters about halfway through their life. Again, they'll separate in 2 stages. The first pair jettisoning, and then a few seconds later, the second pair will pop off. The first stage will continue to fire for just under 6 minutes.
ロケットは正常に飛行中であり種子島の地上局は正常にロケットの追尾を行っています
The H-2B is flying normally, and the Tanegashima space stations are tracking the launch vehicle very well.
Getting reports of good first stage performance. The solid rocket boosters should be burning for just under 10 seconds longer.
SRBA 燃焼終了
SLBA burnout.
SRBA 第1ペア分離第2ペア分離
And there you see the first and second pairs, the solid rocket boosters being jettisoned. The first stage continuing to burn. The next major milestone will be the fairing jettison at about 3 minutes 40 seconds into flight, so just a little over 1 minute and 10 seconds from now. That fairing, of course, protecting the HTV vehicle during the dynamic stages of this initial ascent. And just about 3 minutes since liftoff.
打ち上げ後3分が経過しました
It's 3 minutes after liftoff.
第1段エンジンの燃焼は正常制御系飛行経路も正常ですロケットは順調に飛行を続けており現在の高度は約 100km 秒速約
Again, in just about 10 seconds or so, we'll be standing by to hear that fairing jettison.
Control and flight trajectory are all normal. The flight goes very smoothly. Current altitude is about 100 kilometers. Velocity is approximately 2.1 kilometers per second.
衛星フェアリング分離
Payload fairing jettison.
And confirmation that payload fairing has been jettisoned. The first stage is going to burn for about 1 minute and 45 seconds longer. That cutoff coming at 5 minutes 47 seconds into flight. Once the first stage has done its job, a few seconds later, it will separate. Then the second stage will ignite just a few seconds after that. Continue the climb into orbit, putting HTV-5 into its initial orbit and on its way to the International Space Station. But for now, everything continuing to go well. The on-time launch, the first stage continuing to function as planned. Just about 1 more minute in its lifetime. Everything continuing to go well.
打ち上げ後5分が経過しました。
It's 5 minutes after liftoff.
So passing that 5-minute mark, just about 40 seconds longer in the performance of the first stage.
秒速約 4.2km です。
The flight goes very smoothly. Current altitude is about 160 kilometers. Velocity is approximately 4.2 kilometers per second.
(160 kilometers roughly in altitude. That translates to about 99 miles. So expecting first stage shutdown.
第1段エンジン燃焼停止。
First stage engine cut off.
There we have it. Next up will be that separation of the first and second stages.
First and second stages separation.
And just about 10 seconds after that separation, the second stage igniting, continuing the climb into orbit. So again, at this point, the second stage going to fire for roughly 8 minutes. That second stage cutoff coming at about 14 minutes and 20 seconds post liftoff.
The ground station has started tracking.
And then once the second stage cuts off, it'll be about 40 to 50 seconds before HTV itself separates from the second stage, and then the vehicle will be in its preliminary orbit and on its way to the International Space Station. Coming up on 8 minutes since launch.
打ち上げ後8分が経過しました。
It's 8 minutes after liftoff.
第2段エンジンの燃焼は正常。制御系、飛行経路も正常です。現在の高度は約 250km、秒速約 5.6km です。
The second stage engine combustion, attitude control, and flight trajectory are all normal. Current altitude is approximately 250 kilometers. Velocity is about 5.6 kilometers per second.
HTV already about 160 statute miles in altitude. The second stage continuing to perform well, just about 9 minutes since liftoff. Should have about 5 minutes more of this second stage performance. Second stage burning liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen just like the first stage to continue sending HTV into its preliminary orbit.
安定して飛行を続けています。
The flight goes very smoothly. And we're just about 10 minutes since liftoff.
The first stage already done its job. The second stage continuing to fire, has about 4 minutes and 20 seconds left of powered flight, after which it'll be time for the H-2B to separate from the H-2B rocket and continue on its way towards the station.
小笠原局およびグアム局から追尾されています。
The flight is progressing smoothly. The launch vehicle is out of the tracking range of the Tanegashima and Uchinora stations, and the Ogasawara and Guam stations are tracking it.
小笠原局はロケット追尾を終了しています。現在、グアム局から追尾を行っています。
The Ogasawara station finished tracking, and the Guam station is now tracking the launch vehicle.
So it's been over 12.5 minutes since the successful liftoff from the Yoshinobu launch complex in Tanegashima. The H-2B continuing to fly straight and true. Just under 2 minutes now of powered flight left for this second stage. Once that engine cutoff occurs, we'll be standing by to get confirmation that H-IIB has separated from the second stage successfully. And then, of course, we'll be able to bring you some quick replays of that launch and all the other dynamic events in the initial climb to orbit. But for now, everything continuing to go well for this vehicle. Currently slated to arrive at the station next Monday.
Flight goes very smoothly.
第2段エンジン燃焼停止。
Second stage engine cut off.
And the second stage engine has cut off. Again, it takes just under a minute now for that separation to occur and be confirmed. So that'll be the next major milestone we're standing by for. Everything ticking off per the plan so far in this flight.
HTV-5 分離
HTV-5 separation.
And HTV-5 separation confirmed. This will look inside of the control room where they are monitoring the vehicle.
コウノトリ5号機は国際
So many congratulations to the teams over at the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency.
これをもちまして H-2B ロケット5号機による宇宙ステーション補給機コウノトリ5号機の打ち上げ実況放送を終了いたします。
This is the end of the live launch report of the H-2B launch vehicle number 5 with the Konotori 5 on board.
今後の
So as you just heard, HTV-5 separating successfully now in its preliminary orbit. Just about 170 statute miles over the Earth's surface on its way towards the International Space Station now, following a flawless launch, lifting off on time at 6:50 a.m. Central Time, 7:50 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. The H-2B rocket, both stages and the solid rocket boosters all performing without any issues reported. The H-2B vehicle now in its preliminary orbit on its way towards the International Space Station, currently targeted to arrive on Monday, August 24th. So with HTV on the way with over 4.5 tons of supplies, including water and food for the crew of Expedition 44 and a number of spare parts and experiment hardware for the 6 crew members on board. The vehicle set to arrive on Monday. Getting a couple of replays. This was those solid rocket boosters were jettisoned. Again, coming off in pairs, first the A pair, second, then the B pair, that occurring just about a little over 2 minutes into the powered flight. Here are some views from on board when the fairing was jettisoned, that occurring 3 minutes 40 seconds into the flight. The fairing, of course, protecting HTV-5 during the initial climb into orbit from the dynamic forces of the Earth's atmosphere. All of those events happening on time and as expected. And that last clip was the ultimate separation of the HTV-5 vehicle. Again, in that preliminary orbit, about 177 statute miles. Roughly, it's going to raise up to the station's orbit through a number of phasing burns over the next 5 days, set to arrive on Monday. Here, a quick replay of the launch, which again occurred successfully on time at 6:50 a.m. Central, 7:50 a.m. Eastern. The H-2B rocket lifting off from the Yoshinobu Launch Complex at the Tanegashima Space Center in Japan. Everything going as planned with the performance of the rocket. Both the first stage, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, and the solid rocket boosters powering the vehicle in its initial ascent on the climb to orbit.
H-2B launch vehicle number 5 with the Konotori 5 on board from the Tanegashima Space Center at 8:49 p.m. on August 19, 2015 Japan Standard Time.
打ち上げ以降ロケットの管制は吉信発射管制塔から竹崎総合司令塔に引き継がれています。
After liftoff, the launch vehicle operation control was shifted from the blockhouse to the range control center.
打ち上げの模様
Then again, a couple of quick views of what we just saw a little bit earlier this morning with the successful launch of the HTV on the H-2B rocket on its way right now towards the International Space Station. Again, this will be a 5-day rendezvous, so it's set to arrive on Monday, August 24th. Of course, we'll be bringing you live coverage here on NASA-TV. The grapple coverage will begin at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, 5:15 a.m. Eastern. That grapple being done by Kamiya Yui and Kjell Lindgren. The ultimate grapple coming at targeted 5:55 a.m. Central Time, 6:55 a.m. Eastern. The two crew members on board reaching out with the International Space Station's robotic arm and capturing that vehicle. After that, they'll hand it over to the robotics controllers here on Earth for ultimate install. It'll take a few hours, but we'll resume our coverage for installation at 8:15 a.m. Central Time, 9:15 a.m. Eastern. And that ultimate berthing scheduled to take place at around 8:45 a.m. Central, 9:45 a.m. Eastern. And again, it'll be berthed to the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module, at which point all of the 8,000 pounds of pressurized cargo will be unloaded by the Expedition 44 crew. And along with that, robotically, the unpressurized Calais experiment will have its turn in the days and weeks to come. So to close out now, a flawless launch of the H-2B rocket, 6:50 a.m. Central Time, right on time, 7:50 a.m. Eastern. The HTV-5, the fifth HTV to fly to the International Space Station, now on its way with several tons of cargo for the Expedition 44 crew. That'll wrap it up for all of our coverage this morning. Be sure to join us in a couple of days when HTV arrives to the station next Monday on August 24th. For now, though, we will go ahead and wrap up. This is Mission Control Houston.